I love how Cassie literally said, do not look at the family tree. It's all wrong, it's all misleading, and here I am trying to make a huge ass analysis video out of every tiny detail on the tree itself. Why am I like this? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna attempt to explain that family tree from Clockwork Princess. I know you know the one that I'm on about here. So using a mixture of crackpot theories and any information that we have from the first book in the Last Hours trilogy, Chain of Gold, I'm gonna attempt to tell you what the hell is happening with this diagram. So a brief spoiler warning, because the majority of the confusion from this family tree comes from the Last Hours characters, if you haven't read Chain of Gold, please don't watch this video. Even though I will mostly be using crackpot theories in this discussion, obviously these theories do have a premise, so if you haven't read Chain of Gold, please don't watch this video so you do not spoil anything for yourself. Okay, a quick bit of context about this family tree. So this family tree was birthed unto the world when Cassie released the first edition of Clockwork Princess, the last book in the Infernal Devices trilogy, in 2013. Now, aside from the obvious spoiler about who Tessa ended up with, there weren't very many other spoilers on this tree. However, after the subsequent release of Chain of Gold this year, there are now some gaping holes in this diagram. So the issues in this family tree have been causing more and more distress in the Shadowhunter fandom that Cassie's actually released a statement saying that she made the family tree intentionally misleading on purpose, saying it was really fun for her to come up with a family tree that was massively misleading. Remember, family trees are found objects. They contain only as much information as whoever drew them had. Secret marriages, arranged marriages, people being secretly dead, people being secretly other people. The family tree doesn't reflect any of that. In fact, some of the most important characters, one of whom is a certain James Herondale's Parvati, doesn't appear on the family tree at all. So she released a statement and the fandom lost its shit. And when I say fandom, I mean me. I can't remember where I read it, but I read somewhere that it's implied that Jem actually made this family tree during his time as a silent brother. And while I'm aware that some of the mistakes in this family tree might be a discontinuity issue from Cassie not realizing or not wanting to write the Last Hours series when she published this family tree, I keep being drawn back to it, and today I'm going to attempt to explain it with some crackpot theories that I found online. This video is going to be a roller coaster. Should we get started? Okay, let's start with Lucy Herondale and Jesse Blackthorn. We all know that so far Jesse is still a ghost. Jesse is dead. However, I've got high hopes that Lucy will be able to resurrect him in Chain of Iron or subsequently in Chain of Thorns. I'm sorry, but Ghost Writer is going to happen. I love this ship. It will happen. I am manifesting it so hard. I am going to ignore anything negative Cassie says about Jesse and Lucy potentially not happening, and I'm just going to ignore this ask on Tumblr when someone asked if Jesse and Lucy were endgame, and Cassie said, you can hope for anything. There are no confirmed endgames, no matter what the family tree says. What does this mean? One thing I do want to quickly pick up on is the fact that Lucy is a hell of a lot younger on the family tree than she is in Chain of Gold. So the family tree actually says that Lucy was born in 1891. However, if you check all of her wiki pages and if you read Chain of Gold, she's 16 in the book and it says she was actually born in 1887 instead. If I had to give a reason why Lucy is suddenly younger on the family tree that wasn't a discontinuity error, I would say that maybe she does something so bad, i.e. necromancy, bringing her dead boyfriend back to life. The gem has to make her seem a little bit younger just so they can play the whole like, oh, she was so naive, she was so innocent, she didn't know what she was doing, when we all know that Lucy Herondale is a force of nature and she knew full well what she was doing when she raised Jesse back from the brink of death. From one endgame couple to another, James and Cordelia. Now, I hope beyond hope that these two will end up together. I hope they both realise that they do actually have genuine feelings towards each other. However, it's important to mention that in that short statement that Cassie released about the family tree, she did mention the idea of arranged marriages, and at the end of Chain of Gold, an arranged marriage is actually what James and Cordelia have entered into. So I found a really interesting theory online, and it brings in what Cassie said about people secretly being other people. So this theory takes the root from a question and answer that Cassie did on Tumblr before Chain of Gold was released. Apparently, someone asked her if James and Cordelia Cordelia would marry and would have children, and she answered with the really weird answer of sort of. The theory then brings up the whole the Carstairs owe the Herondales scenario, which I think is really interesting because Jem literally says this in every other breath. He's always like, I love Will, I miss Will, I love my wife, the Carstairs owe the Herondales. Like, these are the three things that guy says. Anyway, we still haven't worked out why the Carstairs owe the Herondales, so one reason why might be that James marries Cordelia to save her reputation, which we know actually did happen in Chain of Gold. So the person that wrote this theory was really bothered and preoccupied by Cassie's answer of sort of, and they were like, how can you sort of get married? How can you sort of have children? And they suggested that the only possible reason is that Cordelia marries so-called James Herondale, but it isn't actually James Herondale, it is someone else using James's identity. Obviously this then ties into Cassie's statement of people being secretly other people, but who could this person be that Cordelia marries other than James? Well, for all those Fairstairs shippers out there, what about Matthew Fairchild? As much as I do low-key ship Fairstairs, I do think Cordelia are my favourite ship at the moment, and the fandom is convinced that Matthew's ending of the Last Hour series is a lot sadder than marrying this girl that he fancies. Matthew. Cassie has said that the Last Hours trilogy will be the saddest trilogy yet, and that woman wrote the Clockwork Princess epilogue. Honestly, I feel like half the reason I can't sleep at night is because I'm worried what the hell is going to happen to Matthew Fairchild. So there's a few theories why Matthew isn't actually on the family tree. So these theories follow on from the idea that the Clave is actually going to punish Matthew for what he did to Charlotte in Ghost of the Shadow Market. So the fandom think that Matthew is going to get his mark stripped and that he's going to be exiled. So there's two reasons why they think this is going to happen. The first reason is because this is like a go-to punishment by the Clave. If you remember Will Herondale's dad, Edmund was actually stripped of his marks and exiled because he fell in love with a mundane. But the second more popular theory why people think this is going to happen is the fact that Cassie released this tarot card, and in the original tarot card Matthew doesn't have any marks. Similarly, the tarot card of Cordelia, in the tarot card itself Cortana is burning Cordelia's hand, and now we know from the recent release of the Chain of Iron blurb that Cortana will burn Cordelia in this book. So people think that these tarot cards are acting as a bit of foreshadowing for what is going to happen in the Last Hours series, and that is why people think that this tarot card of Matthew without his marks symbolises that he will get his marks stripped. The weird thing is this tarot card has since been changed, so I find it really interesting. Was this just like an error on the artist's behalf to not put the Voyance rune on his hand, or did Cassie not want to give the game away? So, what happens to Matthew after he gets his mark stripped and after he gets exiled by the Clave? Some people seem to think that Matthew Fairchild is a direct descendant of Jack Crow or Johnny Rook, also known as Kit Herondale's weirdo of a father. So if you remember in the later stories of Ghost of the Shadow Market that do involve Johnny Rook, he doesn't realise that he's actually got some Shadowhunter blood in him because it goes so far back. It's so diluted, but it is still there. This theory does also mean that Johnny Rook would actually be the so-called lost Fairchild, which means that Kit will not just be linked to Jace, but he will also be linked to Clary as a result. Another crazy theory is that Matthew gets turned into a downworlder, and there's two types of downworlder in particular the fandom think he could get turned into. The first one, a vampire. So I will leave all these theories from Tumblr in the description below so you can go check them out. I do want to credit the original authors because these theories are so good, so if you do want to look into them further, head down to the description and you will find them there. But the theory that Matthew Fairchild could become a vampire stems from a quote in Chain of Gold that he says with Cordelia. So Matthew asks Cordelia if she's really read Oscar Wilde's work, and she says just Dorian Gray, but it gave her nightmares. Matthew then says, I should like to have a portrait in the attic that would show all my sins while I stayed young and beautiful. So if you've read The Picture of Dorian Gray, long story short, there's basically a portrait in the attic that gets really old and is a product of the protagonist's sins, whereas the protagonist can live his life and he stays young and beautiful while this picture in the attic just rots and just turns to decay. So it's really interesting that Cassie has actually put this excerpt from Dorian Gray in her work, and it's interesting to think about what parallels this could actually hold for Matthew. Also, this theory picks up on a quote that Magnus said in City of Heavenly Fire that I have actually been thinking about a lot recently. So the quote goes, Shadowhunters, they get in your blood, under your skin. I've been with vampires, werewolves, fairies, warlocks like me, and humans, so many fragile humans. But I always told myself I wouldn't give my heart to a shadow hunter. I've so nearly loved them, been charmed by them, generations of them, sometimes. Edmund and Will and James and Lucy, the ones I saved and the ones I couldn't. So the fandom has kind of accepted that we haven't really met the shadow hunter that Magnus couldn't save yet. This theory also draws on the fact that Matthew is actually unlikely to die because he's part of the LGBT community, and Cassie, thank God, doesn't want to kill off any LGBT characters. He's one of the protagonist's main love interests, and so if he dies it could just make the whole story a bit skew-whiff, and he's got his own important storyline going on with his alcoholism and his secret about what he did to Charlotte. Therefore, if he becomes a vampire, he still stays alive in the story and he gets to live this like glamorous life that he so often talks about. If you aren't too keen of the idea of Matthew turning into a vampire, how's about a werewolf? So another theory on Tumblr actually contemplates the reason why Matthew isn't on the family tree is because he has been turned into a werewolf. Again, I'm going to talk about something that happens in Ghost of the Shadowmarket, so this is your 9th reminder to go read the book. This quote isn't really a spoiler, so I will share it with you because it does give the base to this theory. So at the end of Learn About Loss, which is one of the first stories from the book, Jem and Sister Amelia, who is training to become an Iron Sister, are discussing the werewolves that they saw at the Shadowmarket. So it's mentioned that the Prayer to Lupus take a hardline prohibitionist stance. So a prohibitionist stance is basically a zero tolerance on alcohol policy. They do not drink. And Jem, as brother Zachariah, ends the conversation by saying werewolves live by a harsh code. So in Clockwork Princess, we actually see the Prayer to Lupus drinking with Wolsey Scott, while in one of the earlier stories of Ghost of the Shadowmarket, Wolsey Scott mentions that he has an appointment with a rather staggering bottle of red wine. So basically, this prohibitionist stance has not always been a thing. So the theory goes, Matthew gets turned into a werewolf, becomes a high-ranking member of the Prayer to Lupus, and introduces this prohibitionist stance as a way to stop drinking and as a way to sober up himself. This means that Jem's comment about werewolves living by a harsh code is actually a joke, because we all know that Matthew does not live his life by a harsh code of conduct. Finally, if you remember the character of Kellington, who we meet in the Hell Rule, and it's implied that Matthew has actually had relations with Kellington the werewolf. So yeah, the idea that Matthew could become a werewolf at the end of the trilogy has already been peppered in, and I do think this theory makes it an even stronger possibility. The last thing I want to bring up about possible reasons why Matthew isn't present on the family tree, I thought I read somewhere but I couldn't find it, so maybe this is my own crackpot theory. I don't know why, but I have the idea that Matthew is going to get exiled, get his mark stripped, and then go live in Fairy. I see you rolling your eyes, but listen, when I was doing some research for this video, I found this really odd post that Cassie released like way before Chain of Gold was published, and the way she describes Matthew doesn't sit quite right with me. So she says, the always delightful Matthew Fairchild, who has a very odd relationship with Tatiana Blackthorne's ward. Like, why is that his most defining point? There is so many other things going on in this book that aren't the fact that Matthew and Grace had some weird kiss outside the Institute. So last month I did a video about everything we know so far in Chain of Gold, all of the information that has been released, everything Cassie has said on all of her social medias. I spoke about how Grace could potentially have some Fae blood in her. So if Cassie is so keen to bring up this weird relationship between the two of them, could the end of the last hours be Matthew sauntering off into Fae to live his life as a sexy bisexual fairy? Speaking of Grace Blackthorne, so the family tree has her actually marry Christopher Lightwood. Honestly, what the hell? These are two random characters that I definitely would not have put together. So in the statement about the tree, Cassie did actually say that there would be some arranged marriages, and maybe not all arranged marriages are bad. Maybe for Grace and Christopher it's like a marriage of friendship, a marriage of kinship, and they end up together and it's all fine, but it's just like chill platonic friends. So on the family tree, Grace Blackthorne is actually called Grace Cartwright. So we all know that Grace was actually adopted by Tatiana, that she was originally a Cartwright, and in my video about Chain of Iron I do briefly discuss how Cassie mentions in Chain of Iron we are going to find out a lot more about about why Tatiana chose Grace and why Grace rejected her old Cartwright name. So maybe in the next 2 books of the Last Hour series, Grace reclaims her Cartwright name and that's the name she chooses to go by. Probably when she realizes that Tatiana is an absolute maniac, maybe she's like, I do not want anything to do with the Blackthorns. So yeah, that's a possible reason why she might be listed as Grace Cartwright on this tree. The last thing I want to pick up on within this branch of Grace and Christopher is how weird this ancestry line is to the modern day Lightwoods. So according to this family tree, Grace and Christopher go down to the Lightwoods that we know and love today in the Mortal Instruments, Alec, Isabel and the late Max Lightwood. However, I always low-key assumed that these 3 came from Alexander, the youngest child of Gabriel and Cecily, who is dark-haired and pretty much looks like Izzy and Alec. How the hell does Grace, who is super pale, super ethereal looking and probably part fae, and Christopher, who again doesn't inherit his mother's or his uncle's dark features and has just sort of like brown hair and purple eyes, may I add, how the hell does that go down to Izzy and Alec? I actually don't have any ideas for this, so if you guys know the reason, please leave in the comments. I would love to see what you guys think because this has me stumped. Speaking of the Lightwoods, what the hell is going on with Barbara Lightwood in this family tree? In Chain of Gold, she dies. Barbara's dead. So, on this family tree, why is her death date later than 1903? Surely this is a continuity issue. I genuinely can't think of a plausible reason why Jem would alter this. It's not like Barbara did anything wrong. She literally got attacked by a demon. It wasn't her fault. So I'm not really sure why her death date is later on this family tree, but I can only put it down to a discontinuity error. From Barbara Lightwood to Thomas Lightwood. So on this chaos of a family tree, next to Thomas's name, it says C extended Lightwood tree, which currently doesn't exist. So my favourite fan theory, which is pretty much universally accepted by the fandom, is that he marries Alistair Carstairs. Thus, this secret marriage, which Cassie alludes to in her statement on the family tree, leads Jem to want to hide it because of society's negative views on homosexual marriage in the early 1900s. As chaotic as this family tree is, it does draw the line of Alistair Carstairs down to the modern day Carstairs, which obviously includes my favourite queen, Emma. Thomas and Alistair would have to adopt children if they wanted to start a family, and there are a few different fan theories out there about what happens to the children that they do eventually decide to adopt. One of these children is none other than Alistair's sibling in the womb, baby Carstairs. So the popular theory is that Sona dies in childbirth and that Alistair and Thomas end up bringing up this child by themselves. This then leads down to Emma. Again, 2 men adopting a baby together would have sadly been scorned upon by Edwardian society, so that's why Jem has altered this record and has altered this family tree. However, as well as raising baby Carstairs, there is another amazing fan theory that I found that I didn't actually realise was a thing, but I found it on Tumblr. I will leave it in the description below. So it's a fan theory that Alistair and Thomas actually adopt 2 other children and the daughter ends up being a direct descendant of none other than Cristina Rosales. So in this theory, Thomas Lightwood is a direct ancestor of Cristina. So this theory stems from the fact that Cristina has an uncle, Tomas Rosales, who died in the Mortal War. Secondly, the person that wrote this theory also picked up on the similarities in personalities between Thomas Lightwood and our girl Cristina, the fact that they are both kind and empathetic, and they always see the best in people despite people not seeing the best in themselves. So Tilly, Cristina and Thomas, how the hell does that happen? Well, the idea goes that Alistair and Thomas adopt 2 other children as well as bringing up baby Carstairs, obviously with the help of brother Zachariah, who is actually destroying these records at the same time. So the daughter that Thomas and Alistair actually adopt goes to Spain or Latin America on her travel year, partly because her father Thomas was going on about how much he loved his travel year in Spain. According to this family tree, Thomas dies in 1915 at the age of 30. After this daughter falls in love with a Rosales man in Mexico, she names the child Tomas after her dead father. Tomas Rosales Carstairs will then have a daughter, an unnamed Rosales, who marries an unnamed Delgado. They then have 2 children, Carmen Delgado Rosales Rosales and Tomas Delgado Rosales, aka Christina's uncle, named after his grandfather. Essentially, there is three Thomases. There is Thomas Lightwood, there is Thomas's grandson, Tomas Rosales Carstairs, and there is Tomas Delgado Rosales, Thomas Lightwood's late descendant. Bonus points, if this were true, it would mean that Emma and Christina were actually distantly related cousins. It's a complicated theory, I know, but I for one am so here for it. Last but not least, I want to talk about Elias Carstairs. So, according to this family tree, Elias Carstairs marries none other than Colette Verlaque. Which, excuse me, where the hell is Sona Carstairs? Who is this Colette woman? But if you remember, Sona's ex-husband was actually Theodore Verlaque, who essentially was a huge asshole. I mean, you could say that she also married another asshole after, but that's a separate story. So, could this Colette Verlaque actually just be Sona under a different name? Again, I want to draw attention to Cassie's statement of people being secretly other people, but I just don't know why Jem would change her name. Is this a discontinuity issue? Am I looking too much into it? Let me know in the comments what you think, because this line of the family tree genuinely has me stumped. According to the family tree, Elias also dies in 1897, which we know can't be true because he drags his ass back into Chain of Iron in late 1903. Again, the question is, why did Jem change his death date? Is it because he fucked up that badly? Jem literally wanted to erase him from the family tree. Completely unrelated, but I realised that in 1903, Elias is apparently 63. I'm not being funny, I don't blame him for fucking up in the mission if he's 63. I can barely keep myself alive and do anything right at 22, let alone fight demons in my early 60s. I'm just saying we should cut Elias some more slack. Okay, that's the end of my insane analysis. I'm trying to work out what the hell is going on of that family tree. As I've said, all the amazing crackpot theories that I've used are credited in the description below. Please go check them out and read into them a little bit further. Give this video a thumbs up if you have enjoyed it, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Equally, I now have a new Instagram account for this channel, and I shall leave the link in the description below. The handle is also on the screen here, so go follow that for daily updates about what the hell I'm doing in my 22-year-old postgraduate life, working in a supermarket, living with my parents. It's all fun and games, so go follow me on there. And I will leave you with this final quote by Cassie. Maybe after the dark artifices and the last hours, I'll do the whole family trees. I'm manifesting the shit out of this.